Hey, Sydney, have you ever given a girl the ick so bad that you gave yourself the ick? Because this one time, there was this girl I knew, and, full disclaimer, always going to be a platonic situation, right? I was happily spoken for, she's happily spoken for, but every now and then, I'd get that vibe like, yeah, I think I caught her admiring the kid, I was like, yeah, feeling myself every now and then when I chatted to her. So, I didn't think much of it. And then COVID happened, which, by the way, should be the title of a book or a series or something called "And Then COVID Happened," and then you can just basically ask anyone how their life changed before and after this pandemic that we like to pretend didn't happen. Like everyone's just everyone's just pretending like, what? Oh, no, that's yeah, we don't talk about that. Anyway, so COVID happens. We're now able to leave our houses with a little more freedom. I'm walking our dog, and I run into her. It's like, oh, I haven't seen you in a while. Oh, hello. Oh, hi. You catch up, and the man, life's crazy. Oh, totally, yeah. And then, while we're talking, and I'm like, yeah, she's just remembered. She's just remembered that. Oh yeah, I used to admire this guy, and then while we're talking, my dog decides, yep, I'm gonna take a shit. I'm gonna take a shit right here. And fair enough, she's outside. And so I'm like, all right, well, I can style this. Dogs, am I right? And then so it's now time to clear it up. And, we're still chatting. I'm like, you know what? I'm not afraid to just sort this out while I talk to her because whatever, it's been right there. And here's the thing. It was the windiest day. So as I've got my hand in the dog poo bag to like pick it up, I can feel the elements fighting against the bag. So I kind of have to time it. I'm like, oh, it's flapping about a little bit, and then like I was like, okay, no, I'm going to have to time this perfectly. We're all good. We're all good. And just as I go to do it, the wind blows the bag like off my fucking hand and I stick my fucking hand in the dog shit. And like, bro, this is how I know I'm fucking psychic, right? This is how I know. Because I didn't even have to look up. I just stared down at my fucking brown fingers with this bag, like tenuously hanging onto my thumb, and I just felt any attraction this woman might have had just evaporate from her soul. It was like a fantasy movie, and like a dark cloud rolled over the city, and a fucking murder of crows fled a nearby tree, and it was like and that was it. I was like, okay, so that's the ick. And I couldn't style that. I was I was rubbing my hand in the grass trying to get this stuff off, and I was like, oh no. And I had to ask her for sanitizer, and I was like, do you have any hand sanitizer? And she was like, no. And I saw in her face, she just didn't want to give me the sanit. I was like, please. And she like, flipping reluctantly gets this hand sanitizer out. And like, I like, and yeah, I was like, tried to just, save a little face at least and be like, oh, that was crazy. And I looked up and she was gone, bro. And yeah, I don't know why I'm thinking about that, why that story ties into today's, like, what I want to talk about today, but it does. And even if it is a bit of a rickety segue, what do you think the world is going to look like when it's full of suitors, male suitors, female suitors, whatever, who don't get the ick? Because I think that's what AI is going to be. For any eavesdroppers, my name is Takuz Washaba, and you are listening to Ways of Thinking. Here's the thing, there is a big pop culture sort of idea of the sex bots are coming, the sex robots are coming, and we've got these mental images of like, oh, guys are just going to be captivated by these fucking factory engineered robot strippers with their hydraulic booty cheeks just like twerking on every dude's lap, who's going to be like, I don't need a real woman. But the fact is that we've kind of had some rudimentary sense of a mechanical or electronic sex partner. It's just that actually it's mostly been enjoyed by women, right? So technically, vibrators and magic wands can be seen as the amoeba, really, right? Of what we are trying to think of as something that's quite new or emergent. And that itself is funny. And, right, like, I'm going to try and make sense of this. So bear with me. But in the digital realm, the norm is it's more normalized for women to have some sort of aid, right? But in the meat space, like in real life, it's kind of the other way around, right? Men are stereotypically seen as the non-emotional, purely mechanical, I'm just trying to get that. And women are seen as the ones who attach emotion to the sexual experience almost inextricably. So then it gets interesting when you flip it into that product space where actually it's more normal for a woman to have a toy, but if a guy has a toy, then it's a bit more derided and it's a bit more sort of kink shamed, and it's flipping weird, right? Because and I suppose you could. There's definitely a quite a reasonable explanation, but at first glance, it is interesting because for guys, I suppose you've got that dynamic where it gets more and more realistic and like silicon parts and faces and legs and stuff. And then for girls, it's like it doesn't even have to look fucking remotely human. It's a fucking blue piece of like suspension that's been yanked out of the bottom of a car and it's been given a nice name. And it's like, yeah, that's my electric boyfriend. So yeah, it is funny to me how women have long since had these sort of sexual devices, these battery powered disembodied dicks. They can be found in like 80% of households and 180% of landfills somehow. And I realize that I am painting this with quite a broad brush, but I think it does start to uncover a lie that we've allowed to spread through the collective consciousness around the like the heterosexual man's quote dogged pursuit of sex, right? Because we couch it in these linguistic terms that make it seem like it's all about domination, and and like, yeah, we're very happy to not have emotion involved in it. So we even, like, you can even look at the words we like to use, like, you have a sexual conquest, or like, back in the day, and they'd be like, oh, I think I'm gonna score. It's all about victory and a prize of some sort, right? But just as in sports, I think there is like a whole emotional drive involved. And I think, like, for a lot of dudes at least, guys aren't just trying to get pussy. They're trying to get, I don't know, they're trying to get person, trying to get validation. They're trying to get connection and status, and yes, they're trying to get pussy, but But the point is that it means something. I wonder if it's just another linguistic determinism issue where we don't want to be seen as emotional beings, but like it means just the same if we say that there's a psychological component. And so maybe that's just a weird marketing thing, but it's more than just like what's happening physically for for most dudes. I like to think, and I think the ones who don't think that are probably the ones that have suppressed it the most, right? Now, look, yes, it means something. We just interpret it differently between the sexes. And moving on a little bit, at this point in my intellectual and philosophical journey, I do find myself agreeing with people who say that, that the sexual contract isn't characterized by these purely anthropological shifts in social enlightenment, but by technology, right? The dynamic between straight men and straight women fundamentally shifts at the societal level when a new technology comes into play. And, that can be in very direct ways, right? Like the pill being a prime example, any sort of contraception. It can be a bit more tangential, like antibiotics, or even more downstream. So, like agriculture and fire and the steam engine. And then you have slightly more insidious technologies and media that are both direct and indirect, but nevertheless profound, like the internet and the smartphone and I don't like fucking Ice Spice. I don't know. But here's the thing. I think AI is all of those things. I think AI is both is direct, it's indirect, it's insidious all at the same time. And maybe so in ways that society isn't even like ready to grok. We're not prepared to try and internalize that into the mental models that we use to shape the world. But, the bottom line is that technologies don't just like perform tasks. That might be our motive for trying to create them. But technologies allow human psychology to play out in different ways, right? There's always going to be some sort of technological determinism in the things that we invent, right? So, aviation, pre aviation, and post aviation have very different ways in terms of how they view the size of the globe. Excuse me, I have a bit of a cold, but we're going to soldier on here. And not only are they deterministic, I suppose they have like a path dependency to them as well. So, if we invent aviation or we invent AI, for instance, if that technology was then to disappear overnight, we already have a memory of that technology. So we're going to try and either emulate its effect or try and redevelop it, right? It's path dependent. Just because it's gone doesn't mean it's gone in our minds. So yeah, technology allows human psychology to play out in different ways. I don't know where I've heard that sentence. I heard it somewhere. If someone else is like, hey, I'm not a plagiarist, I'm just fucking forgetful. And same goes for the idea of the sexual contract. I think that's actually a book title. I think it's by Carol Pateman, but I haven't read the book. I just happen to have listened to a lot of people who have, and so I'm sure that there's going to be tons of areas where maybe I don't agree, but fundamentally, I'm kind of a proponent of this zeitgeist addendum way of looking at things. So I suppose while we're doing all these sort of caveats and stuff like that, I think it's worth looking at. I just want to scope this down just a little bit, right? I'm well aware that I haven't brought in like same sex dynamics and I haven't tried to like paint this idea from a female perspective. I know that it might not be the most inclusive view, not even in like in an annoying saccharine way, but just statistically, I might have some blind spots, but I don't think that stops me from pointing out the potential pitfalls in this technology that were that is we don't even have to let it into our homes. It's in our homes whether you like it or not, right? So because like okay, so like I said earlier, right? To get this technology to actually become ubiquitous among men, it has to do a lot. Like it has to be super sophisticated from a technological standpoint, right? It has to feel real. It has to feel realistic. It has to speak realistically. It has to move. It's advanced robotics plus large language plus plus plus. But I'd bet my bottom dollar that to do the same for women would be a lot simpler because you just get the vibrators that already exist and you'd put a speaker at the other end and insert a large language model in that just gives affirmations. That's like that just says what you says what she wants to hear, and it's just like that girl's a bitch or whatever. But anyway, that's that's not in the scope of what I wanted to talk to you about. The three key points that we want to internalize right now before I fill you with hope or I scare the shit out of you are these. One, the male approach to sex contains intricate psychological dynamics, contrary to the base animalistic attitude that we like to portray. Two, technology is the key factor, if not the factor, in shaping the quote sexual contract. And three, new technologies create new ways of thinking. So, with these three ideas in mind, I'm going to throw in the entirely speculative claim that most infidelity happens digitally. Just in terms of touch points, even if there's a physical component, right, there's bound to be a paper trail. Like in this day and age, it's all digital, it's all through your smartphone. And then if you go back a few decades, then it's all letters and phone calls and notes. And if you go back even further, I don't know, telegraphs. I mean, how far back do you want to go? Do you want to go back to smoke signals, right? Like like a lot of it is just down to the media that we use to communicate. um and I wonder how many of those the world over throughout our history as a species have actually just happened entirely in those media, despite there being two active players on either side, right? The entire ground that it's happened within is this media space. So what's going to happen when the person on the other side isn't a person, but multimodal, large language enabled, image generating agent that passes the Turing test? In what ways will that compromise the resilience of a long term relationship? Not to mention economically how that then disrupts this recent iteration of the porn industry that seems to be based mostly on the illusion of one-to-one interaction, right? Once people realize, well, hey, look, you're never going to meet that model anyway. So once an LLM that can show you what you want to see can replace them, I think it will. But will that technology, whatever it ends up being called, will it just be seen as a type of porn? Because let me tell you, like, I've done a lot of prompt crafting, like over this last couple years. I won't call what I do prompt engineering, right? Like there's dudes out there and ladies that like do serious like LLM prompting and stuff like that. I just play with the software. And I also, so I've done a lot of prompt crafting, and and like I know a lot of guys who've looked at porn, like and they told me all about it, and it's gross. So but like so this is third hand information coming from me, but what I can say with some confidence is that prompting prompting a large language model or a diffusion model or some image generator is not the same as just, clicking on a search bar and simply typing in fucking Thunder Thigh MILF 69 deep throats, which is like, that's one of the search terms that I was told about. Like, I've never looked that kind of thing up myself. But the point is that it's only a matter of time before that prompting process feels more like just having a text conversation, as we often do, and that user interface becomes more natural and and creates that illusion of there being a person on the other side, and the right sort of intermittent reinforcement systems are put in place, meaning that it wouldn't simply show you what you want to see every single time. It would work like any other one of the apps that you use on your phone do, which is that they'll give you what you want intermittently, so it feels gamified, right? They'll um, uh, they'll they'll probably use the sort of casino-esque models that social media has already sort of come close to even mastering, as far as we're concerned, right? But the point is that, if this is applied to a person who's just vulnerable enough, or just at that point in their life when, they're susceptible, or they've learned to target you based on other data that that you've given them, and they've mastered that interface, it'll essentially just feel like a new tool. Like Rodney, I think it was Rodney Brooks. I'm sorry if I'm wrong on this one, but there's a robotics engineer, computer scientist called Rodney Brooks, who's famous for saying something along the lines of, once an AI tool starts working, we stop calling it AI. Like, if SatNav didn't exist and it came about today, we'd pretty much call it AI, but we don't. So AI has this way of simply just disseminating into the culture, and then the new thing comes along, it's like, oh, that's AI. And then I suppose we realize that it's not intelligent, really, it's just doing a thing, and then we give it the correct nomenclature, or the nomenclature that makes it easiest to sell, and then we deploy it into the market. But the point is that it will be nothing like porn. it will be like it'll be like having an affair, really, right? And whether it undermines a pre-existing relationship, or it like stops lonely people from pursuing real meaningful relationships, whether that's good or bad, whether it ultimately helps someone or whatever, it's gonna do something to us. Just, it's gonna have an impact. The dawn of the synthetic mistress will introduce a third category in between human and non human, which is like human enough. And then it'll introduce new facets into the idea of fidelity, which, okay, melodramatic. But if you worry that porn is having an adverse effect or a warping effect on the way that young people, young men, treat their partners, what do you think this is going to do? Because this is going to range anything from a really time consuming habit to chronic engagement. It's going to like take over lives. And if you think that it's the youngsters who are the most susceptible to this, I'm willing to wager that you're in for a rude awakening. I think that kind of engagement is actually more suited to, people who are experiencing solitude that they have no control over, yes, or people who are going to be older, which is where it gets interesting, because those are the people that are going to have money to spend. Because this stuff isn't going to be free, and lonely people are just one of the first targets. And I genuinely think they're going to crack this really soon, because like most of the guys making this tech are friggin' lonely virgins anyway. Sorry. No, I, I'm joking, right? Like, obviously, Um, the motivations are going to vary. I respect that. The outcomes are going to vary. I don't even think it's going to be inherently bad, right? But a lot of these agents, they're not out there to grok the cock, right? They have business models. In a way, it just comes down to influence, like one word that you would have expected to hear in my last recording but didn't, and maybe it comes down to addiction and habit formation combined with the fact that financial difficulty and financial impropriety are a major cause in like relationship breakdowns, right? I'm just saying that like unchecked, this kind of technology within a household could take on a form similar to, say, like a gambling addiction. So, like, yeah, in short, I'm no Luddite, and the message is definitely not anti AI. It's more anti naivete because your computer doesn't want to fuck you. Your computer wants to marry you and take half your shit.